And Laura's going to tell you about her connection to us and to Dr. Claret and about her experience in her career, but we're going to learn from her about, obviously, her experience in nonprofit. And I'll hand it over to Laura now. Thank you so much.
Delighted to be here at long distance. I will admit this is the first class I've ever taught long distance. So here we go. Go around the room quickly and say who you are, what your name, your instrument, and where you're from.
Let's start with Catherine. So your name, instrument, and where you're from.
My name is Catherine. I'm a soprano, and I grew up in Tennessee.
Go ahead, hi, I'm Alex. I'm also a soprano. I'm from England, Manchester.
I'm Jenna. I play clarinet, and I'm originally from Georgia.
I'm Cody Williams. I play bass, and I'm from South Carolina.
Hi, I'm Lee. I play piano. I'm from South Korea.
Great. Well, I'm Laura Calzolari. I'm a former flutist. I have 2 degrees from the Manhattan School of Music. I then went into music administration and later into even other fundraising. So I'm here to tell you, we're going to start with my, an overview of what I think is important in arts management, particularly at Jen's request, fundraising. But to get things going, I'm going to tell you a little story about how I got involved with this. So I live in Florida. I saw you wearing the Florida sweatshirt, so I thought maybe you were from Korea. You were from Florida. I was sitting in the pool one evening, and a gentleman was in the pool there that I didn't recognize from my building, and I introduced myself. He said he and his wife had just moved in. He must have asked me what I did, because he said, "Oh, do you know my daughter, Fabiana Claura?" And I said, no. She was here 8 years, and her husband still comes back. I guess, she has a music school here. So he was telling me all about her. He gave us contact information, and that brings me to you all today. And that is proof of the little adage that we always say in music. There are 12 musicians in the world, and we all know each other. So here we go. So I've been in fundraising since I was still actively playing. And I know a lot of young people who have branching out into having their own ensembles, which is how I started. I actually started a music school and needed to know something about arts management. So I will tell you right off, I learned a great deal by going to a couple of national seminars, national conferences, depending upon what your area of interest is. There's one that deals with national community arts education. It's called the National Guild of Community Arts Education. And then there are several, there's the Choral Society has one, Chamber of Music America. And I found everybody very, very willing and happy to help me. I came home with dozens of phone numbers. That was how you stayed in touch. And that's how I got going. And I always felt like I had the confidence and the backup to call somebody if I had a question. And just to go to even things like that are local, get involved in your communities. So I guess you all have a program, you all have a project. You're going to tell me about that later. And you are all doing volunteer work, correct, as part of the program? That's great, and I would like to hear a little bit about that too. So in arts management, in arts administration, let's say, fundraising is key and central to everything. I would say that second only to the artistic programming is fundraising, because we can't go any further with the arts programming without the support of fundraising, because unlike in profit, we don't have a profit motive, and we also can never sell enough tickets. Even back in the day when orchestras were very, very strong, the big orchestras never made more than 50%. And I think that sort of holds for most nonprofits in music, that 50% of ticket income is about the best you'll do. And the lack of the profit motive is also very key to the whole nonprofit world. Do you know the difference in terms of how it balances itself? It's not that in nonprofit, we must run good, solid organizations. And in this day and age, that's very accepted. Major donors will immediately want to see one's balance sheet, what the earned income is opposed to the philanthropic income. But that's not the underlying mission of what we're doing. In all nonprofit, it's the goal, it's the mission that we support, and not a profit. This is a significant difference. Artistic planning, if you're starting something, and in any event, all artistic planning has to these days, and should always have been, realistic in its goals. You can think big, but in a 5-year plan, you've got to have very realistic goals of what you can achieve. And I think that that's often a problem for smaller organizations. They get very big ideas, very excited by things, and then can't carry them through. Well, at this point, does anybody have any area that you'd like me to address in particular? Hello. Don't somebody say something.
Should I ask grant writing and your experience with that?
Okay, that's great. My experience with that is extensive, because this is the way life goes. About 15 years ago, when I was having trouble getting a good arts management job in Miami, which is where I live, I stumbled through a friend, working in the medical area. I ended up being the senior director, that's how I retired, of foundation giving at the University of Miami Medical School. My portfolio was $41 million a year. A lot of that was grant writing. So in medical, of course, there are many, many grants that are public grants. I didn't do any of those. Those are very, the NIH and that kind of thing. In the arts, you have very little that's like that. But I did all the, Gates Foundation, all the big foundations like that. Grants writing is a skill. It's honed by practice. More and more, even grants applications. I sit on the review board for the Department of State of Florida grants, and we just had a panel. A lot of them now have automatic word counts and character counts in their descriptions. The character counts are awful. The word counts are a little bit better. But I'm going to tell you that I think everybody in arts management, no matter what your position is, needs to have a 1-minute elevator speech And you know what that means? If you get in an elevator and you find out you're in, with anybody who's curious, or maybe with Bill Gates, you better be able to tell it very quickly. The same is true in grant writing. So I had, because I had the time and the staff to assist me, I had 250 word, 150 word, 1,000 character words, descriptions of dozens of things, so that we could plug them in or just spend a little bit of time adapting them. Now, we had the time to do that, but you can build that, and it's a fabulous exercise because you have to cut out every single word that is non-essential. What I don't like about characters is sometimes you have to substitute a word that's less long but isn't as descriptive, but we don't set the rules, right? There are many more resources to finding granting opportunities than there ever were. We were pretty stuck with the Foundation Center, and that online resource. I was in New York, so I used to just go to the Foundation Center. Then they had these old microfiche. This is really going back into the dark ages. We didn't even have internet there yet. You just use volumes of brochures. Now you can go on. Charity Navigator tells you stuff about organizations. When you're looking for grants, the first thing to do is to do a search in your area. Do it nationally, even if your grant isn't, because you want to try to hone down and find organizations that are similar to what you are or what you would like to be again with that 5-year plan, and see if you go to a foundation that you found, who are the recipients. And it doesn't matter if if it pops up, if you're in the Coral area, just for laughs. You're in the Coral area and you find a foundation that in Massachusetts funds several choral choirs. There is one. And you're not in Massachusetts, look at those choirs to see what they did, and that sticks out. Because you may find others you may find another foundation that has choral music within its sphere. I will tell you, it's always about the quality. Do not brag about your quality. This is all from, you always want to have what we have, external validation, right? If your organization has gotten grants, of course, that's always the first place. If your organization has gotten great reviews or mentions in media, all of those things, that's what you say. I've seen many, many young organizations that brag about how great they are. No one's interested in, of course you think it's great, but you wouldn't be involved, right? You want to see what other people say. So that's very important. Again, having very accurate, realistic budget that's manageable. And the buzzword is sustainable these days, meaning you can keep it going at the level you're at. That's become more and more important. What is the balance when you're in a larger organization, and I'm not even saying large, not with say 5 years of history, maybe more, mid to small size. they're always going to look at the balance between the administrative cost and the artistic cost. Is it, and it can be two-sided. Is it too high to justify the rest of the budget? Or is it too low so that the reviewer would say, oh my goodness, they just don't have enough support to sustain them going further. And then how are you going to do that? Don't ever be afraid to accurately address what your issues are. Most grant applications now will ask you what they are. And they want to know. And if you're saying that you're struggling and perhaps you're using the funding, this is the case in the Florida grants, for instance, you can use a certain percentage of the grant to fund administrative support. So you have to tell them what you're going to do with that support, and it has to, of course, support the mission of the organization. And it doesn't just have to be an artistic administration. If you don't have somebody doing fundraising, 9 times out of 10, they will be happy to help that because they all know you can't get anywhere without fundraising, right? And so forth and so on. Does that help you?
Yeah, thank you.
So if you're interested in grant writing, and by the way, it's a skill that is, I still do part-time grant writing for the medical school, partly because I became so good at it. They call me up and they're doing a big project, and they said, can you help? And I said, of course. Hone your skills, start practicing. Go online and get a grant application from where your area might be, or just see if you can describe your organization in 150 words and really get everything nailed down. It's a good exercise to have. I would suggest, I didn't have a chance to ask Jen this. Do you have any contact with the, am I speaking too long?
No, I was just making eye contact so you can see that I was here.
Have you had any contact with the university advancement department?
I have through my role as a teaching fellow in previous years, but not with this class.
Because usually people, if you're interested in grant writing, usually if you found out who that person was, there's probably a team, who they are, and say, could I come and just talk to you? I can't believe they would say no. People in fundraising are, fundraising is friends meet friends. Fundraising is friend raising. So we're all very gregarious. We love to meet people, and I wouldn't hesitate to do that. And I don't know, Jen, maybe you can set something up going forward. But these university fundraising are we used to say Cadillacs. I guess maybe now you'd say the Teslas of the business, because they have years and years of doing this. They have the message down. They have all the skills available to them. You may not go into university fundraising. Not everybody likes it. I never could have done anything in the main campus. There wouldn't have been anything that would have interested me except music. But the medical, because I found absolutely fascinating. But you probably would agree with me. I don't know, football, I doubt it, because I don't even know the game, so it would have been hard. So that's an idea. Let me talk a little bit about the role of artistic programming and fundraising. Many of the big, more established, or the most established organizations in music, of course, are your major symphony orchestras and your major opera companies. The symphony orchestra got a big boost just before and right after the Second World War, because many Jewish musicians got out, if they were lucky, before, out of the areas in Eastern Europe and Germany and Austria, where they had the big orchestras. You know that Mahler conducted both the New York Philharmonic and the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra in the the first decade. He died in 1911. In the first decade, he did that, and you didn't hop on the plane back and forth, right? So the growth of the major symphonies in this country owes everything to its connection to Europe. And I knew many of the players in the New York Philharmonic. The teacher we had at our music school, they were emigres from the Soviet Union, and they had gotten out later, of course, to have artistic freedom. And her husband was in the fiddle section at the Philharmonic. So those organizations are the most solid. Unfortunately, their management systems, at a certain point, management became somewhat divorced from the artistic mission, leaving it entirely to the music director and his group, and putting in the hands of the business of orchestra into the hands of people that were business. And that was, of course, back in the day when the unions were very strong. They're not as strong as they were before, except in the top two tiers of music, of orchestras, and the big opera orchestras. So that has lightened up, and they've seen that even on the highest level, the person that's the president, who would be the business equivalent, well, nobody's the equivalent of the music director, but you know what I mean. These people tend now to have more arts experience, which is important because you've got to understand both sides of the business, and the business is not important except for what it's putting on the stage and out to the audience, right? Make sense? Audience development, volunteer management. Again, it's all about friend making, right? Your volunteers will come from your audience because they love what you do. I am a volunteer for a choral group based in Miami called Seraphic Fire. They are nationally recognized. They, many of them don't live in Miami. In fact, only one does live in Miami. They come to Miami 6 times a year to do a series of about 6 concerts in the whole area. Half of them sing in the Desert Chorale, which I heard at Aspen this summer, at Taos. And there are these choirs all through the country. I volunteer. One of the singers stays with me when they come, which is great fun. I happen to have a Steinway piano, which is also real helpful. And I've become very good friends with the gal that always comes and stays with me. I have become a donor in my modest way. And I have brought people to the organization, all because I heard them and was absolutely blown away. I sing in an amateur, well, we call it a volunteer choir because many of us have a professional background. So you always want to be making friends with your audience. Audience building is easier in a sense today because of what you can do with social media. And you all know much more about that than I do. But Seraphic Fire, which is well established, they get grants from the National Endowments and major music funders. They rely heavily on social media. They post stuff before all their concerts, after all their concerts, and it's really a terrific way of getting to people. And as I say, you all know 1,000 times more than I do about that. And I put the volunteer and audience development together because as a small organization, if that's where you start, you need to rely on volunteers. But even the big organizations, the major arts center in Miami, which has 2 large halls, a concert hall and an opera ballet hall, all of their what shall I say, program, I'm forgetting the word, the people who give out the programs, help me out here. They're all volunteers in both halls. The person that manages them is a professional, but everybody else is a volunteer. And why do the volunteers do it? Because they get to come to the concerts and they can pick the series they like the best, and they can come to the concerts, or they have a Broadway series, and it's terrific. So, okay, next question.
Oh, next question from them?
Yeah.
Got it, okay. So it's questions from you all. We have some on the, whatever you posted last night on the discussion board.
Now, tell me when it's time. I started my timer too late, so I'm not exactly sure where we are. How much time is it before they need to quickly tell me about their projects?
We could do that now. That would be great. And then we do have a couple other questions that students submitted ahead of time when they looked at like your website and your LinkedIn just to.
Oh.
So we have a couple questions there, but if you want to move on to this hearing about their fundraising projects, we could do that.
What would you all like to do? Hear the answers? I didn't know you had those questions. Hear the answers or talk? Probably hear the Come on.
Okay, let's have you all talk, and then we'll get to the questions.
Okay.
So you're sharing your experience about the fundraising project that was put together. It was due today, so they finished the project. So they should have a little bit to talk about, the planning process, what it actually was when you got there. And then Laura can give you some feedback or ideas. You can ask your questions about what you might have done differently or anything like that. So let's start with Cody in the back.
Okay. Well, for my fundraising project, I work with the Braditich Foundation pretty often, which whose mission is to show the double bass as a solo instrument and overall further its education.
What is your project?
It was writing a grant.
Sorry?
Talk a little bit louder. Okay.
It was writing a grant for it.
Okay. So now continue.
Sorry, what was that?
Now you can continue. I just didn't know what your project was.
Okay. Yeah, so I was asked to write a grant for that because I'm working with the foundation to teach classes to local bassists for all-state and solo playing technique and all of that. So I've never actually written a grant before, and it was a little rough at first figuring out exactly what I wanted to do in it, but a lot of it was description and overall finding, less than 150 words, like you said, descriptions, so that way you wouldn't lose track of the reader.
Okay.
And that's about it, just writing the grant, answering the questions in there. Is there anything else you wanted to know about it?
Yeah, and are you actually gonna, this is not a real project, or is it?
It is a real project.
Okay, do you think you're gonna get the money?
I believe so, because what I put in there, the executive director of the foundation looked through it, and we worked together afterwards to make sure that everything was.
It's a very worthwhile endeavor. I hope they do fund it. How much did you ask for?
It was, well, we asked the Diodario Foundation, so the max is 20.
Oh, yeah, great. And you'll put it toward supporting the teachers, right?
Right, so that way to make sure that the students have scholarship and can attend, even if they have financial need.
Super. The Dario is usually very generous.
Great. Jen?
Okay. Next.
Hi, I did my fundraising, well, I did my volunteer project with the Dallas Winds, the wind band here in Dallas.
Oh, great.
And so I continued working with them on a fundraising project. They started last year what they call Dallas Winds Honor Band program, which they take some students from Dallas schools in the band, and then they met once a week, I think 10 weeks last spring. And then they also paired with another organization called United Sound, which helps special needs students do music, and then they kind of work together. So it's a very new thing that they started up, and they don't really have a lot of funding. They don't have a lot of fundraising for that. They do a lot of fundraising for the Dallas Winds itself. They have a lot of donors that donate. So I actually met with the education director. His name was Todd Toney. And so I met with him outside of, I think we met at Starbucks a couple of times just to kind of talk about what we could do. And a lot of their donors for Dallas Winds are usually people who don't get on social media a lot. And so they don't have a huge social media base. I mean, they have a Facebook page and Instagram, and I looked at the Facebook page and there was over 15,000 followers. And so I thought, oh, we could do like a GoFundMe campaign or something just to get the social media platform up. And so I created a GoFundMe page, and he helped me with the wording. I typed out everything and then sent it to him, and he was like, yeah, this looks good. I would change this and that to make it a little bit more less businessy sounding. And so we had that running for a couple of weeks and shared it. I shared it, he shared it. They got it shared on the Dallas Winds page. And we were hoping to raise about $750. We thought that was realistic. That would provide tuition for 10 students for this program because they have to pay to be in it. And unfortunately, after completing it, we only raised $150. So it was a little interesting because I've never done a fundraising campaign like this before. I thought since they had so many people interested in what they did, and it was education, and I thought it was a really neat project. I was a little disappointed with how much we actually made, but hopefully I can continue working with them in the future or something, and we can.
Those can be very successful. I know a number of composers who have had pieces funded on one of the sites. Sometimes the number of followers is misleading. I'm not going to say it's not accurate, but it doesn't interested people really are. I'm surprised the band didn't get behind it, but that's a great place I had forgotten about that. A great place for anybody to start. Because you're using strengths you probably already know, and anybody can apply and usually something that has a good cause will get funding, as yours sounds like it did. But don't think about grant writing. You can't ever give up, because you always will be turned down more times than you will then you will be approved. It's just the way it is. So keep at it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Alex?
Hi, I worked with the Greater Dunton Arts Council and they support. Where's I worked with the Greater Dunton Arts Council and they support local, other local non-profits, and they use their facility to house different events and things like that. So I was trying to help them fundraise for their Saturday family program, where they invite families around to do arts and crafts and listen to music while also getting local companies to provide like food. And their first event was they were going to get Kroger's to provide donuts for this Saturday's upcoming event. And I kind of did my fundraising a little differently. I went to local businesses to kind of see if they could partner with Greater Dunton Arts Council for the programs. So they would be the sponsor of the day for that month and things like that. It's kind of challenging though, because I went around the square in Denton to see who would like to participate, and it was interesting because they were interested, but they needed more information, so I had to email it to them. I had I didn't really get many replies. Yeah. I feel like we didn't really raise any money. It was more about the partnerships in the end, so that they could work with them in the future to raise money for that. I don't know if that's a bit cheesy, but yeah.
Well, again, it's friend raising. And if you have something that's a startup, the more people that know about it are going to bring you to more people, and some of those more people or more entities are going to be able to give money. A lot of those sponsorships on a kind of community level will give you something, maybe not money. I mean, you can usually get a place, if it's an event, you usually get places to give you food items, for instance, or some kind of takeaway from the event, with a logo on it. Not yours, theirs, but not necessarily cash, until they get bigger, of course. And then it's a real sponsorship. But again, it's all important. All of these, everything you guys are talking about are important components of a startup fundraising campaign. Okay?
So like Jenna, I also partnered with an organization I had done my volunteering project with. They're called the Media Music Works. They're an early music ensemble in the DFW area that does live concerts as well as recorded music videos. So all year they fundraise so that they can create these videos as well as their concerts. So they had just come off of a very large fundraising campaign through the area called North Texas Giving Day. And we were looking for a fundraiser that was not directly asking their donors to give more money, since they had just done this campaign. So we worked together and created a merchandising website for them, which is something that they have been interested in trying to develop anyway, so that they had a way for some of their audience to take home items from their concert, as well as give their volunteers and their performers a more uniform look. So we worked through a website called Redbubble and created a merchandising website.
How was that done?
This website specifically allows you to go in and design your own merchandise. So I used some of the materials they already had, so like a t-shirt or a mug, or they even had bath mats. Like they had some interesting items that you could design around, right? And selected which ones we wanted to use and which ones we wanted to put our logo on, and they would design it to that product.
Has it been launched?
It has been launched, yes.
Are people responding to it?
We did a campaign yesterday to submit this out. We didn't have anybody respond yesterday. However,
Yesterday is early.
yes.
Right. Yeah, that's there's more and more of that being done. It's a good idea. And it's not about, you're never going to make a lot of money that way, but you're going to spread the word. You're going to make friends. Pretty much, I mean, if you can see how many mugs I have. You know, everybody needs mugs, right? So I tend to get mugs from organizations that I'm fond of and are happy to give them whatever it costs. Tell me what the name of the organization and Ensemble, what it, more about it?
The ensemble's name is Lumedia Music Works. And they, I'm sorry?
What's the makeup of the ensemble?
It depends depending on what their show is. It's led by an early music soprano as well as a early music violin player, and they put together an ensemble of local musicians. They have a harpsichordist who will drive up from Houston and work with them. So depending on what they program is what they need in their ensemble.
And how long have they been in existence?
This is their third year.
And how are they doing?
I think they're doing well. They've grown every year. The fundraising campaign that they just came off of, North Texas Giving Day, is a local organization. Everyone fundraises at the same time. And
that here too, yeah.
Yeah, each year they have doubled whatever they made the previous year. So.
I only ask because in this kind of ensemble, there's a friend of mine started one 4 years ago called Illuminarts, and it runs the gamut of styles, you know, from early music to a lot combination with electronic stuff, much more modern, pieces that are written, pieces that are improvised, and it's become quite popular. So that's the kind of area to look in. Okay, well, last but not least,
Please tell us about your.
I can't see him, but there we go.
Well, I'm going to do the fundraising project today with Texas Wins, and I'm going to do by myself. Game changer, which is the place where the people can play game there. The thing is, if people play game there, around like 10% of the total like profit will be donated to the nonprofit organization. So I will go there today and tell them about the Texas Wins and nonprofit organization and make them play game again. Yeah.
What nonprofit?
Sorry?
Which nonprofit? What kind?
So, Texas Wins,
What is it?
the 501c3.
Yeah, okay.
What kind of work do they do?
You mean this organization?
Yeah, because what does the organization do?
They play music for the elderlies.
Oh, oh, good. Oh, yeah. That's because you always have to have a purpose, right? The purpose What I like about it is the gamers are young and then they're playing music for the elderly people. I like that. Right? You make that connection. That's really good. Bringing the generations together. Okay. How are we doing, Jen?
We're good. So it's 10:20. Our class goes for another half hour, but I know we were going to wrap up with you in the next like 10 minutes or so, 5-10 minutes. So
Ask some questions.
do you have questions, or do you want to, you could look at the discussion board and ask them. So Jenna, you had a good one.
Yeah, so you've worked in medical nonprofit and music nonprofit. What were some, what was similar and what was different between the two?
Okay, so the medical nonprofit was the University of Miami Medical Center. Enormous. I mean, the budget is the size of the, and this is very typical in academic medicine, the budget is the size of the entire rest of the university. So the university's budget is 2 million, the medical center is 2 billion, and the medical center is 1 billion of that. It's, I know, enormous. So even by music standards at the highest level, the budget size is just insane in comparison. But in the end, you're doing the same stuff. You know, and having, this was not something I looked for. I stumbled into it. But these things happen, and the skills that you develop in arts administration carry over to other kinds of nonprofit work. I think because of our training in music, we are very disciplined people. When you get out in the world, you'll be surprised how undisciplined your peers going into other fields are, unless the other fields are medicine, talk about disciplined. The law, lawyers tend to be, when they're working, disciplined. They can be a little undisciplined when they're partying. Of course, elite athletes are the same, but their span of activity is much shorter. They don't do something lifelong, even the very best. It just doesn't, the body wears out. So that discipline will carry you forward. Your passion, you cannot work for a nonprofit and not have passion for the thing that you do. And I have been to talks like this. I've been into small organizations where I've asked people why they work there, and they literally said to me, because I needed a job. Well, if you needed a job, if I was smart, I'd go work for a corporation where I could earn twice as much more money and get twice as much benefit. You don't go to a nonprofit because you need a job. You go to a nonprofit because you need a job and you're devoted to the mission of that organization, or that field, be it the arts, be it education, be it working with children, whatever it is, right? And all of the things that I learned enabled me to do that. And I had done a lot of grants writing, though I had been the administrator of a large community arts school for many years. That was my main job. But certainly the discipline that I learned just in my training in music was great. And starting from the ground up in the fundraising or the management is very helpful, because you need to understand every role in your in your business. That help?
Yes, thank you.
Alex, your question?
I don't know if they're relevant. Did you do grant writing for music while you were in the music nonprofit?
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble understanding you particularly. I know you have a little bit of an accent. Put your hand by your mouth, that doesn't help. So thank you.
You do any grant writing for the music nonprofit?
Yeah, oh yeah. Until I get somebody to help me do it, but I still did most of them, yeah.
How did that compare to the medical grant writing?
It's actually music. In a sense, it's much easier, the music. In a sense, it's harder because fundraising for the arts is harder in general because it's harder to convince the person that the arts are essential to the culture of a country. And I think that this is becoming harder and harder as we go forward. And medical is the opposite because the things they are doing on a daily basis are absolutely mind-boggling. I mean, things that just 15 years ago, they only dreamed of doing. They were just in the lab, you know, beginning to get information. Now they are doing that on the human body with tremendous success. So it's pretty easy to convince somebody that the medical thing is absolutely essential. And in the medical field, there's a whole, we call it grateful patient fundraising, because those patients who, either the patient themselves or that patient's family that your medical center has saved from a rare or not even a rare cancer. The research is what has brought that from bench to bedside is the expression used. And so people understand that immediately, and that's how you raise most of the money that comes from individuals, is from the grateful patient side. It's where you end up and what you want to do, right?
Anybody else have a question?
Continue that. How do you convince people to contribute to the music nonprofits?
Say again?
How do you convince people to contribute to music nonprofits?
Well, again, you're making friends. So the first off is your audience. Making the case very clearly of what your needs are. And for the audience, because the reason they've gotten to know the organization is because they love that kind of music or that kind of art, theater, opera, ballet, graphic design. Graphic arts are a little bit different because that area, theater does too, but not on an individual level. The graphic arts have a huge for-profit side. Miami has now hosted for the last 15 years the largest art fair in the world. It came from Austria. It's called Art Basel. The millions that are made from buying and selling individual pieces of art. There's nothing nonprofit about that at all. It's a business, a big business that supports the arts, which is fabulous, but it's not nonprofit at all. So you go to your audience, and if, taking Seraphic Fire as an example, they want to do, well, my volunteer choir, we fundraise very little. We fundraise to cover the cost of our accompanist, can't do it without him. Our music director is retired, does it for free. And then once a year, we hire a chamber orchestra so we can do a bigger choral piece. So we did the Brahms Requiem. So we paid the soloists and we had a reduced orchestra, 2 pianos. And it's not a lot of money, but we need to get, if we're going to do that, and our little audience supports us because they like to hear us do different repertoire. Yeah, so it's all over the place.
Anybody else?
I have a quick question. You said that you sit on the review board for grants now, and I'm wondering what are some similarities between the organizations who receive the grants?
I'm sorry.
Okay. You said earlier that you sit on the review board
Yes,
for
yeah.
some of the grants. So what are some similarities between the organizations who receive the grants and who do not?
Oh, that's pretty easy. So I sit on at the Florida State panels. There are 3 levels. There's the top tier, which is the largest organizations. Then there's a very large middle tier, and then there's the lowest, the newer organizations. And I've done all 3, and they're always pretty much the same. With variabilities. Again, the organizations that are not doing well are not balancing. Well, if the artistic quality is not good, and a small organization or even a volunteer organization, somebody was speaking about bands. There's a tremendous band that's all volunteer up in Tallahassee area, northern Florida, where they do so much in the community for every big walk, or for Alzheimer's or something. They play there, and they have a paid conductor, and then they have transportation costs and that kind of thing, because it's a big good old-fashioned band. They're all retired guys, or younger guys too, or women too, and they sometimes cities have fundraisers that'll fund for their local, like a homeless shelter. They go all through that area, and we just give them tons of money. We give them the full grant. They never ask. We don't give them tons. They ask for the max in their category, and we give it to them because they are meeting a need, and they're giving people an opportunity to play music. The only way music is going to continue if there are enough people who play it through their lifetimes, who pass it on. There's a picture on their website. 3 generations of guys are in the band. Grandfather, older son, and now the teenage grandson. And it's just wonderful. So that the artistic quality, how much the organization is fulfilling their mission. And their mission is not only to give their players an opportunity to play, it's to get music out into the community. Then again, how well are they managing with the dollars that they can get, either from, sometimes the places I think they ask the places that want them to play for like a walk, I think they ask small amounts of money, like, $150 just to pay the conductor for that one time. So they're asking, they get little kind of what you would call contracts. Again, the balance, you don't want to be working with too big an administrative staff. That is the first button for me. Why were you paying an administrator X percent of your budget when you're only paying your singers, say, all of whom are professional, the same amount of money? This doesn't look, this is a balance, right? And it's interesting. So on these panels, I think there are always 9 of us. We do it by phone, 9 of us. And it's always like any kind of grading. Well, there are organizations where everybody will give the organization 90 or above because the organization is doing everything right. So let's take those out and let's take an organization that is doing, let's say BB plus work, right? There'll be a couple of people who will still give a 99 to that organization. Then there'll be some people who will always be on the low side. I'm trying to stop this thing. Come on, close. Why can't it cancel? There we go. Thank you. Who will be very low, and then say one or two, and then the 6 people are right there, and all voting in a 3-point difference. Like say it's B plus. 6 people will give them between 86 and 89. And it'll come out to an 88. And it works like that every single time. So does that help? Anything else? Oh, and making it seem, oh, there is, yeah. Do we have to stop?
Teacher, no, I just have a question for you. Yes. So in the beginning, you were talking about the balance sheet and how it's important to have, financial statements that are put together and reflect the activities of the program. Can you talk about how grants show up on financial statements? When do they make their way to the balance sheet to become an asset versus showing, an incoming grant and then it goes out for a program within a calendar year? Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, it goes into the projected budget. It doesn't show up on the audit until it's paid. And sometimes because all of your federal statements and your audit are the calendar year, not all, especially arts organizations, have calendar year budgets. We tend to have seasonal budgets. So then it will show up. But you're always working with your actual budget. So it's not a problem when the lag is there. There are footnotes in the audit. For instance, if it hasn't paid, there'll be a footnote that will say grant from X, Y, and Z will be payable at in the second half of the fiscal year, and so that the person reviewing it saying, oh, okay, they're getting that money. It's just not within this time period. I did forget to say more and more the importance of inclusion. Inclusion means the whole gamut of who we include. Certainly it's people of all walks of life, all ages, people with disabilities, and in fact, all grants now are looking to see how, especially in music and in the more classical side of music, we are addressing this. And in the state grants, this is true in many of the public grants. So the way you come up with your score is that 20% will go to X, 20% like artistic, 20% will go to Y, and then you come up with, it equals 100. There is always a percentage now that goes to how you're meeting inclusion and accessibility, meaning are you getting out? It's not enough just to have to go to your venue, a concert hall, a church, or whatever, and play a concert. You have to go out into the community, and that can mean bringing the music. If you have a large community, which abound in Florida, of senior citizens, and there are many that are low-income seniors, those people aren't going to get to concerts, and many of them, even if there were bus services, many of them are too disabled to be bused, and many of them now include the great thing is you can submit videos. I saw one where a small ensemble that did very clever work went to perform in one of these performances, and the people, you could tell, some of them, many in wheelchairs, many very elderly, they were just uplifted. It was, I was getting teary-eyed because they gave these people such joy. And so it's however you do it, but you must do it. But I hope you're all doing it, because I think you understand this better than young people do. Anything else?
Any other questions? All right, I think we could, unless you have any final thoughts, I think we could wrap it up there.
Just keep at it, guys. Don't ever be afraid to ask for help. And, you know, you can, many people with small ensembles, voice, string quartets, are always their own businesses. And they're doing everything. You know, they may have an accountant when they get to be the Emerson String Quartet and so forth, but they're doing all the other things themselves. So, you know, your own, what you're doing yourself right now is a great place to start, or what you want to do, right? Keep the dream alive. Let's keep music going, huh?
Yes. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.